Good afternoon. It's Joyful Hermit. I've been sort of avoiding talking about my death experience, but because it does extend over quite a length of time and there is a lot that weaves in and out of it, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. And if I go on too long, I'll stop and then try to pick up on another video to finish it or whatever. But I want to give enough details because it's just incredible how God arranged arranges our lives and foreknows things that He wills for us and allows things to happen. So I'll go back to I think before 1984 even, when different times that I knew things weren't right with my husband and the marriage, but I buried. I would sense God would give me uh, signs and showings or supernatural event at night or with a little quick vision. All the time, I didn't know what these things were called or that other people didn't have them just as a matter of fact in their lives. And some people do, though. And anyone could to a certain degree. Maybe not in the mystical sense of spiritual phenomenon, but in a more of a contemplative sense, an awareness of God's presence. Everyone can have that, can develop that through awareness and love of God. So, but as far as being a mystic, quote unquote, you're generally born. God chooses souls for that role in life, and it involves a different element than awareness of God and contemplation of God and communicating with God in a sense of within our lives, knowing God's presence and praying and communicating back and forth that way. All of us, that's for everyone. So, anyway, different things had been happening. My husband would tend to use threat of divorce as a means toward the end of controlling me. I knew just for myself, we had just gotten moved to Pacific Palisades area, where he had the year before gotten a principalship in Beverly Hills, and but had wanted us to stay behind, me to stay behind uh, with the children, do another year of my work, and our house hadn't easily sold, but he wasn't really actively pushing on that or thinking even to rent it, and we tried to move up there. So with him. So anyway, I've talked about that before, the different things that happened that year, just the struggle it was for me, and how much energy it took me to handle everything. And I did end up selling the house by pursuing one of the persons who had looked the summer before, who really liked it, but were just on the edge. And I then, without a realtor, contacted them because they had stopped with their realtor, not involving ours. So I was legally free to contact them, and I got it sold, and we ended up moving up there. And I had known during that year that he had had yet another affair with someone. He brought home his laundry. He didn't come home often. It got down to maybe every other weekend. And he'd bring home his laundry, and the woman's underwear, not mine, was in the laundry. And he had this involved story. He was very convincing with it. I didn't buy it, but I didn't let on. He just kept saying, "Oh, you can even talk to my secretary. She'll prove it." He said that eighth grade girls had put them in his truck to get him in trouble with me or something, just whatever. And I just sort of went along with it because I had thought if we can all just get moved and be a family again, eventually he will hopefully outgrow his womanizing. And I had my career, I had the children. We got moved up there. He then suggested we go to Hawaii for spring break. Um, he never really wanted to be with the children. And I noticed that, but I thought, well, I'll do whatever to try to improve, get our marriage in a better mode. And he even said, invite your brother, your sister, and her husband. We go to Hawaii that week. He'd gotten a free condo or a very low price from a teacher. Actually, I think it ended up being someone he was having an affair with. They're a different person. So we had that week, but during that week, he was cruel to me in very obvious ways, but my sister and her husband didn't notice. But just little things like not remembering my birthday, and um, when my sister remembered it finally in the end of the day at night, and I had seen a piece of art that I thought would be lovely for our home, and he refused. He no, you can't. You're not going to get you anything, and just very cold. And I realized he wanted someone else coming with us because he didn't enjoy being with me. So there was that, but I kept thinking, well, let's work through this, work through this. Um, got the children and the girls in a lovely school, and I was interviewing that summer. We went back to my parents' lake home in the Midwest for was going to be for a couple of weeks vacation, and which was going to be very good. But toward the end of it, I got an interview with a top-notch school district in the West LA area, and I did end up being runner-up with it, which was really a grace from God. I was so encouraged because I was just barely 33 then, and it was quite an honor to be a finalist. And an inside person had gotten the job, and they told me that if they hadn't had this inside person who had worked for them, I would have been the finalist. I would have been the one. And I was very encouraged and sort of, humbled by it and in awe that God was going to allow me that. But I was exhausted. I was exhausted from all I had had to do on my own the year before, including the baby had gotten sick, had gotten pneumonia, nearly needed to be hospitalized, and my husband hadn't even come home for his first birthday. So that was about how it was, as sick as the baby was too. So anyway, a couple of weeks, it was maybe the end of the first week in August, I sensed within me that I wasn't doing what God wanted me to be doing with my life. Even though I was getting near the end of courses for this doctorate in education administration with an emphasis in organizational leadership, I sensed this, and I just said this prayer inside of me. God, Lord, do with me whatever you will. Do with me whatever you want. I feel that I'm not quite going in the path of my life that you want. I didn't know what it was because I knew I wasn't right for the classroom. It wasn't my place, wasn't my thing. Even though I loved the idea of it and I tried very hard. But later on, when I realized I was a mystic, I understood. It was being in like a cell with 30, 35 high school students, many of them not at all interested in learning or the subject matter. And I would sense all these souls, though. It was like a bombardment going on. It was too much. And especially if the room didn't have windows, that I could look out and get refreshed that way, even as I would be giving a lecture or having a question and answer with the students or such. So that it just wasn't right for my person, for how God may created me to be in a room like that with all these people. So I said that prayer, forgot about it. 2 weeks later, um, we'd gone back to the lake house. I had flown back. He said, "You'd have to take the baby then was 16 months old. You have to take him with you. I'm not going to take care of him here. I'll have the girls here, ages 9 and 7 then, but you take him. I'm not going to deal with him." So I take the baby back on the plane. He had obviously had an ear infection or a blockage or something. He screamed terribly. He was so, the pain of the pressure in the airplane. Found a neighbor who I had made friends with, watched him while I went for the interview, and then I had a follow-up interview. And I was just upset even by that he had a son and he didn't care. He didn't want to bother. So they fly back, and one of the parents or something had given tickets to a Linda Ronstadt concert at the Hollywood Bowl. I didn't know who Linda Ronstadt was. I wasn't into that, the scene. I was um, I was into other things, my children and my husband. I had to take care of the household, cook, shop, clean, take care of the children, all their needs. I loved being a mother, and I was grateful that it got up close enough that I had been applying for administrative jobs and hadn't gotten anything, so I wasn't rushing to get work. I really needed time off. I was exhausted, and he didn't push me on that, other than to keep applying for any administrative job in the area. And so uh, he got these tickets. He wanted to go on a Friday night to this concert, and I wanted us to stay home with the children, play games with the girls, or watch a children's movie with them. He rarely interacted with our children. Of course, the baby would be in bed, but no, get a babysitter, get a babysitter. Want to go to this concert. He always liked to go out to dinner, go out, not with the children. He would like to go places, like to the girls. I had them in soccer. I always had the children in activities, and I would take them to friends, meet friends, try to have children over, and wherever we moved, which was often because he would end up moving on to another position fairly soon, which I found out was because he was quietly being terminated for his philandering and his lies or whatever all he was into. So, and he had an amazing gift of getting jobs from basically a relatively small district out in a new area being developed in Riverside County to Beverly Hills. But I didn't realize he would lie. He would lie through these interviews, and it was a great smooth talker. So that was that. That was part of his narcissistic sociopath personality disorder that I wasn't aware of. Um, I was getting on that he was, I'd lost some trust in some womanizings that I knew deep down but had tried to bury. So, but I was keep the marriage together, keep the family together was my thing, and I didn't believe in divorce. So, and I believed in our wedding vows, vows made to God. So, anyway, I gave in, got a babysitter, thought I'd better do what I can for our marriage, um, because, I could tell when I wanted to go looking at houses, so we would settle in there, hoping we would stay put for a while. He didn't want to. Um, but he did like going places with the girls in soccer team. He loved having, as a minister told me, he loved having me on his arm. I was a sweet young thing. I was attractive back then, and he was had a engaging personality, but not what you would call a handsome person, super handsome or anything like that. But we worked well together. And as the neighbors said, that when we walked in a room, we were noticed as a couple. So he liked that. I was useful to him in his career and having staff over. In fact, I had a large staff dinner, his starting the new school year. I put on a huge buffet, and I liked to gourmet cook. I was very creative, so he liked that. He liked if we had to go to district office galas or invited to hear this or that. He liked, I looked nice, I dress up, whatever. So I could assist him in his image, is how it worked. So went to the concert. Uh, he at the end decided he wanted to leave a little early. We were so far back. I mean, I couldn't see who this Linda Ronstadt was. I did recognize a couple of the songs. I wasn't one to have radio on even, but he would in the car when we would go places. So he liked being seen with his darling children. We had beautiful children. And that was an image maker for him also. And he would be very engaged with the children in front of other people, very involved. And so that was just how it was. And he did do things like he would change diapers, or when to keep me working all summer when I was media center director in the district before. He would, on his 6 weeks that he wasn't um, in his principalship position, he took care of the children during the day, changed the baby's diaper, would bring him over for me to nurse during my work. So he was a worker. No complaints there. He was a worker. And he did what needed to be done to make it work until he got up to Beverly Hills and didn't and liked it that we weren't there. That's what I think moved the divorce thing along. But he had threatened divorce before at times in our lives in a means to control me to do what he wanted me doing if I had some other idea, like I'd been accepted to law school. He didn't want that. But he agreed to a doctorate in education and administration. I knew I needed something other than what I was doing. So anyway, he wanted to leave early from the concert, just a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes early or less, 4 minutes early, to beat traffic. He's a nervous type man. A lot of nervous movements he would have, not super offensive, but people noticed who knew us well, and I noticed, and I had to pray before I married him if I would be able to handle those nervous motions, and I decided yes I could. Look at the inner, and he had many fine traits. I don't want to make him out as not, but I also didn't know. You don't know someone who's a sociopath. It takes a lot to discover that in a person, especially the more intelligent they are and the more capable, the more they can hide it, and that's part of their game. So we get home, we're driving home, we're at a corner, up in the hills in Pacific Palisades, getting prepared to turn left. We're driving a small Mazda, and nice car, the nicest car we'd ever had. And uh, our house is like 3 houses down to the left, and we hear this roar. And here comes a small vehicle, speeding, does not stop, makes the turn, and we see him coming. It goes into slow motion. Even at the time, I thought, why didn't my husband step on the gas just to move us out of the way? He had time to say a curse word and he's going to hit us. But I do understand how that works. He was stunned. He was frozen. But we were hit and hit hard. And I, in my mind, prayed right before we were hit, in that split second, and thought, well, we'll find out if we'll live or not. And because the kid didn't brake at all at a stop sign, he just came and swerved right into us. It was 11:22. The light flashed at 11:22 on August 22nd of 1984. My body was shifted radically to the right, hit the window, and back, so that. But I was in shock. I was able to get out. He said, "Get out, get out." He couldn't get out from his side. He thought his leg was broken, but he managed to get out. I got out. I was in shock. I knew I was limping and everything, but I just put it out of my mind. No, I wasn't hurt, or not much. I was relieved. I thought, well, this isn't terrible. And I had glass. I had some cuts, glass all over us and in my pockets and everything. Well, he told me, go home and tell the babysitter to call the police. And I even called out, somebody opened a door. These kids get out of their car and talking about, well, we shouldn't have been drinking. I told you were going too fast. And one of the friends to the driver said he went and got aspirin and water from a neighbor. We didn't know those other neighbors. And my husband said, well, that's what they'll do to try to keep you so you can pass a breath test for being drunk. Well, the fire department came, evidently, and a patrol person for a neighborhood patrol came. It took the police over an hour to get there, busy. Maybe it was a Saturday night. No, I think it was a Friday night. Yes, it was a Friday night. And but they were very busy with other things, and evidently, the call went in that it was no injuries or something, or nothing great. The fire department took the husband to the hospital. They wanted to take me, but he said, no, you're not hurt. Stay and make sure the police arrest this kid. And I thought, well, I'm limping, my leg hurts, but, you know, this is how I am, my heart. I was worried for my husband. I said, no, go. The fireman said, are you sure? And I said, no, I'll stay. And my husband said, no, you stay. So I did. And police finally came, and by then the kids could pass their drunk test, and the neighborhood patrol, we found out later, his dad was wealthy and knew the patrol people. And the patrol people talked the patrol man talked the police out of arresting and said he wasn't drunk when he arrived. Well, he was, but not arrested. This neighborhood patrol guy said to the police, well, boys will be boys. So I don't blame the police per se, but he had a record of drunk driving. He was 18 years old barely. They were millionaires. The dad was smart enough to have minimal insurance and had the car insured under their quasi business. They bought real estate, had a lot of investments. So, no insurance, barely, that we could get out unless, going to court or something. But um, uh, babysitter's mother came, took me to the hospital, was worried about my husband. She was worried about me, said, "You need to get checked out." Because there I was limping. No, no, I'm okay. And we got him home. He was fine. Had a bruise on his leg. But that's just typical of who I was married to. And I uh, didn't want to face it ever. I just never did want to face it. So, until later when I had to. But got home maybe 12:30 or 1, and well, at least 1 o'clock. And by 2 o'clock, I couldn't sleep, and I started having terrible pain down my neck, my spine, and down both legs, but mostly my left leg, the one I had been limping on. So we'll move on from that. He was up and around the next day just fine. I wasn't. I was injured. Ended up going to see a neurologist, also then a parent from his school who was a neurologist or an orthopedic he was, and decided no, that I had a bulging disc, but not bad, and nothing to worry about. And marriage was falling apart then that fall. Within 3 weeks of the accident, the husband came home one evening around 6, 3 weeks after the accident, and came home from work on a Thursday evening. I went to greet him at the door. I had been preparing dinner, taking care of the baby. The daughters were in the family room right by the kitchen. They're all open room, and our little dining table, doing their homework, playing. The baby was around my legs as I was getting the table set. And I greet my husband at the door, and he just says, "I don't want to be married to you anymore." Just like that. And then he says, "I'm going to start a new era of honesty." And I thought, oh, well, we'll see. And he came in. Of course, I was in tears, fighting back, sobbing, to be told that. And with the children there, so I fought back tears. I didn't want the girls to know. I didn't want this, he was 17 months by then, to sense anything wrong. I was protecting my children. But he mentioned one affair that he'd had in a previous school district with his PTO president, a female, and but claimed that was over with. Well, I found out later on it wasn't. He kept that going while he had an affair with one in the his school district, at least one, probably more. Um, but he wanted to have the weekend. He said he was going to go to a hotel, that he needed time to think things through. Well, it turned out I was devastated by all of this, devastated. The next day, I drove back to where we had lived before, where we were involved in a church. He always put up this image at church, too, my husband had. And it all fell apart that night when he said he didn't want to be married anymore. And he obviously was spending a weekend with a woman. But at first, I even deceived myself with that and thought, well, he sincerely wants to go to a hotel to think through our marriage and work on himself or whatever he needed to work through if he wanted to stay married and all. But of course, immediately I was doing anything to keep the marriage together. But I went to talk to our minister from where we had lived before, and my husband took the day off from work so that I could do that. Well, he suggested it even. Well, I think what happened is that he wanted to arrange with his affair mate the weekend they had planned together, because that's what ended up what it was. And he did that several times. And he continued, having meetings or conference or having to do this or that with the school district. And after insisted that we get counseling, guilted him into it, I suppose. And he loved counseling. It was an opportunity for him to shine. And it was a female counselor that he thought he could pull the wool, but finally, through several weeks of counseling, she called his number and he blew up in a terrible fit of temper, which I knew about, but she didn't. And they also had students who were in a one-way class. We'd agreed to that they could watch the therapy sessions, but everything was wrong with me. He kept saying all these things that I was awful about, bad at this, bad at that, even unattractive, even heavy. I've never been heavy. I was by then, thin as a rail, just with the stress of it all and all of this truth coming out, and still not the truth though. I found out more and more and more. So I was having tests for my neck, my lumbar. I was in terrible pain. He started treating me cruelly, and it was just an unbelievable nightmare. And I'm sure any of you who've been through this know what it's like. Your world is falling apart. And if you're a mother or a father who loves his children, and it's the wife who's leaving and who's been left all along in a way, but lied about it. And anyway, it's a horrible thing, and you go into a mode of doing whatever you can to keep a family together. So, I had various tests. At Cedar of Sinai, they tried injections, and the pain was so horrific and worse. I had to be taken to the car in a wheelchair. They got a hold of him. I was supposed to have just gotten a cab or something home, but they did call him and say, "No, you need to come and get her." So he came. Didn't want to. He was cold. He didn't care. I got in the house, got on the sofa. I hadn't had anything to eat. He wouldn't get me anything to eat from the refrigerator. Our daughter did. I asked the oldest daughter, and she, "Yes, Mom. Yes, Mommy." She went and got me chips or something even. I didn't expect my little girl to cook anything. My husband wouldn't get me anything to eat. But she brought me chips. I remember that. Chips. I was laying on the sofa and in terrible pain. And the husband sat there and just started saying how ugly I was and how fat and how terrible it was that I would ask our daughter to bring me something to eat. He wouldn't. He refused. I could not get up and walk. I was in that kind of pain, shooting down my legs. So, and it was terrible, but hung in. Counseling. I didn't go back for any more treatments. I did for a while, and this doctor who was a parent at his school became aware that we were having marital problems, and he says, "Well, it's just emotion. You're just having emotion, is all. That's the problem." So he got me into some physical therapy, and then said, "That's good, and you're fine." And I just learned to cope with pain. I've had headache and back pain and down the leg pain ever since August 22nd of 1984. And then dealt with all of that. I took my courses at USC that fall, and he told me if I took 3 courses the next semester, the marriage would definitely be over. But I could take 2. Well, he knew if I took the 3, I would get this higher honor, more distinguished degree, doctorate. Then because you had to take 3 courses 2 semesters in a row to prove you had it. I was an A student. Maybe I got a B plus once or something in a class. But it was very difficult doing all that. But I was at home that semester, which was a blessing for the girls and for our little boy, a little baby boy. And they did not know anything that was going on. I'm sure they sensed things. But the next semester, he insisted that there was an opening at the high school and insisted that I take that or divorce. And I was still at that point of doing anything to keep a 2-parent family for my children. I had already resolved in my mind that he could pretty much do whatever, but and that maybe someday he would outgrow his cheating and he might learn to be decent to me again. But I was willing to live in a marriage like that, of my being emotionally and mentally abused. Well, he tried, but I learned to not be part of his cycle anymore. Well, he didn't like that. And sociopaths, the more I studied about them later in my doctorate in clinical psychology, which I didn't finish because of pain, but I knew exactly then what I had been dealing with, and that it was my stopping the cycle that caused him the fun of it for him and the intrigue and the control to stop, that he didn't have the control over me. He started becoming more physical and more demanding, but all the while still having his affairs and things. It all came to an end then. He left on St. Patrick's Day. And ironically, our daughter, who was in first grade, or no, maybe she was second grade then. No, first. She came home from school the next day. St. Patrick's Day was a Sunday. The baby, the second daughter, and myself went to church. The oldest daughter said she had a tummy ache and wanted to stay home. She didn't feel well, and the husband had stopped going to church. That ruse, he had lied to me when we were engaged and dating and all through that he had been a youth minister of a Methodist church before we met. Well, I'd just gone to California for a summer and met him and stayed on because we fell in love. And they're easy to fall in love with, sociopaths are, if you read about them. They're very charming, and we were a good work couple together, a great team. And anyway, so I worried about my daughter while I was at church, but got home and she was curled up on the sofa. And I realized later that she had sensed, I'm sure she sensed the tension. Even if in her mind she couldn't diagnose or analyze it for what it was, but because she didn't have a temperature or anything like that. And there was a suitcase at the door, and he said, "I'm leaving." And I said, "Well, you need to talk to the children then." But he didn't want me in part of the conversation. And I realized later I should have been. I should have insisted. But at that point, I had enough fear of him to not push his buttons more than just going along but breaking the cycle on my part. But I didn't push too far because he could become violent and very angry. So he left, and I think I even right then and there said, oh no, right then he was going to another woman, a teacher's house, had offered to take him in, he said. Well, I had followed along his affairs that year, and this woman, and this Nikki, a teacher that he was actually having an affair with, but this other teacher who was letting him come stay with her when he wanted to be gone to think things through. I knew that she was hoping he would love her. She had never been married. And I just, my inner senses were clicking in very well by then. I was seeing the whole scene. So at some point, though, I kindly and evenly split up the furniture and gave him half of things, even half of the pans, half of dishes, whatever, because I thought this is going to be, hopefully, and I felt it would be, a simple divorce. And I even told my lawyer that, and he'd gotten a lawyer. A simple divorce because he didn't want to be married to me. He made that very clear many times. But once the divorce got into it, and he didn't want people at Beverly Hills to know that we were getting divorced. But one of the teachers at the high school in my department noticed I didn't have a ring on one day. But I think that word had spread why he was being let go, because she told me that it had spread. And so it wasn't from me, because that woman said she would not say a word about the divorce. But my principal found out, and ironically, I had gotten great review at Beverly Hills High as a teacher. And I did very well there. I had great parental support, students, principal felt that I did an outstanding job. And then it was the last year I taught, 2 years later, that principal who put me on probation. So we see the differences, how it can go in education and stuff. But that last year that I taught, I did miss a lot of school. I was hospitalized a couple of times. My back was so bad, I was out of school for 5 weeks. So I think that bothered him. And he also, that later principal, thought I was faking my back injuries and pain. So there you have it with that. But so the things got very bad in a hurry. And the lawyer said I needed to start having someone with me when he would come. We had arranged between ourselves that he he wanted to have the children. I think it was every other Sunday or something back then. And so he never really was into being a dad, except for how it made him look when we'd be out with the children. It's cruel maybe on my part to say, but that's what it boiled down to by his actions all along through it. And even other things with the first baby, which I had talked to him about having a baby, and he finally agreed. He didn't want to at first, but he agreed. And I thought, well, this is what probably other women do this too. Not every man is all that eager to have the responsibility of a child, but deep down they really do. My dad did, you know. Well, I was so naive and stupid, actually, very stupid. But so we got pregnant, and a teacher at my school's wife. I was a teacher back then. I'm jumping back a little bit when I was pregnant with the first child. I was taught up till the last couple of days. And a teacher at my school, his wife taught at my husband's school when my husband was an elementary teacher. And it was maybe a week before due date, and the man at my school said, "Your husband never told any one of his staff. None of them at Diamond Bar Elementary know that, or Neil Armstrong Elementary, know that he's having a baby." And he says, "Wow." He says, "That's different." He says, "When my wife is pregnant," he says, "I'm so excited, I'm telling everybody." And I think this teacher maybe was trying to tip me off, because I found out that he'd been running around on me even back then while I was pregnant. And both times I was pregnant when we lived in that area. So they found out, had a real fast baby shower, that he did like that because he was the center of attention. That's the narcissist. So, but that was a little thing that stuck in my heart. It stuck in my heart that he didn't care enough about being a father to tell anyone. I think I also thought it ruined his image. Later, I realized it ruined his image. He was likely having an affair with someone on his staff and didn't want, or other teachers in the district, in the teachers' union that he was involved with. He didn't want word out because it would maybe disrupt women from wanting to have affairs with him. So that's what I, bit by bit, when reality hit, and there were other things that had come up that I had pushed down, including a waking vision in which I saw one night he was out late, later than he should have been, with a union meeting. And by then, though, this is telling, I even thought, "Lord, if something's happened to him, I'm concerned, but it's all right. I'll make it." We had two little girls then, but I said, "I'll make it. I'll make it." And then when he walked in, I'd sort of built up in my mind that something had happened and that the police might come. But he walked in. But in the meantime, though, I had this rush of air come through our house. And I had what now I know is a waking vision, where I was shown a woman laid out on a parking lot between cars, laid out on the ground. And I saw my husband and another woman or a couple of women going over to this person on the ground. And something had happened to the woman, mugged or injured, or something had gone on. And he got home and didn't want to say it was outside a restaurant. I was shown this. He didn't want to say any of that. I said, "Well, you were eating out. You were eating out." But my main concern was, I said, "There was a woman on the ground, injured. How is she? He was like, "Whoa. How did you know? How do you know this? How do you know what?" And of course, later on, when all the truth came out, I realized that he had been out with someone that he was having an affair with when this occurred in the parking lot, and they found the person and called the police and all. But um, that was part of what I think freaked him out when he wrote his goodbye letter to me, of all the things that was wrong with me, including he didn't like my mysticism, and used that word. And I've mentioned before, I had to look it up in a dictionary. No, mysticism, what? And the dictionary definition didn't make me. I thought, so what? So this is nothing to dislike, to decide he doesn't want to be married anymore or doesn't love me. But I didn't realize how these situations bothered him. And of course, why would they bother someone who was a pathological liar and living all these other lives, using his energy and his intelligence, faking that he was a Christian and had done all these things, even lied about where he'd grown up? How would I know? You know, you don't expect someone to lie about where they grew up. His parents, because they moved then to California from um, uh, Pasco, Washington, or in that area, or Lewiston, Clarkston, Washington, Lewiston, Idaho area. But he said he'd been born in Bozeman, Montana. But they'd lived in California so long that, knowing his family, no one talked about, where he'd grown up. But I then eventually did find out when we had his grandparents come. His grandmother said something about where they had lived before they'd moved to Southern California. But I thought, well, maybe he was just enamored with, because he had worked at a dude ranch in Bozeman. And actually, if he had been caught, he would have been in jail for statutory rape, because he had sex with a 14-year-old. He was 16. Um, all that came out, that truth came out when he decided he was going to start his new era of honesty. He would then say things to hurt me even more, but I needed to know. God needed me to know these things, so that I could face it and let go, because I'll jump back now into that spring of 85 when he came one Sunday. He was bringing the children back from having them that day. And I had a woman from church there with me. My lawyer said, you need someone with you, and she had volunteered. He came in, he became enraged at me, and he, for some reason, decided he was going to kidnap the children. The children had all run in the house, and he had put the baby down. And he, in the house, saw the woman, flipped out. He first grabbed, he first grabbed our daughter, who was then, I think she had just turned 7, the middle child, picked her up, and she was screaming and crying, carried her out, and I went out, and he shoved her in. He had a pickup truck then. Shoved her in the truck, came back in, grabbed the baby, carried him out. He was screaming for mommy. The oldest daughter, immediately when she saw her sister being carried out screaming, ran and hid in a box in the garage. I didn't know where in the garage she went, but I said hide, and she'd already knew and was there. And I was frozen. This other woman was frozen. I thought, just stay calm, stay calm. We'll get this sorted out. I prayed, and but what happened is when he came back to get the baby and took him out, my daughter, who he had put in the truck, had escaped, ran around to the side of the house. I found out later, He went back out with the baby, realized that it was getting hopeless. He put the baby down, well, he was 2 then, just barely 2, in the driveway, just out there in a drive close to the street in Pacific Palisades. And not say, you don't do that. You don't let a little toddler out like that. Came in, shoved me down the hall to the bedroom. Well, the woman she thought that he was going to kill me back there. But she froze. I think she did call her husband, who called the lawyer. The lawyer went to my church. That's how I found out what lawyer to get or whatever. I had no means or whatever. But, and he did. I thought he was going to do damage to me. But God protected me. He did do his real hard thumping. He threatened me. He got in my face. He was enraged. He shook me. But then he abruptly turned and left. And he threatened. He made threats. And stormed out. I went out, got the baby out of the drive, and he peeled out of there, leaving tire marks. And the woman helped me go around looking for the girls. We found the one inside a box in the garage. And it was a boxes I had collected because I knew I had to figure out where to go next, and had decided to go back to this area where we had come from, where I had friends and contacts, and our family doctor, and the church people where we had gone to church before, and try to get a job there was what I was going to do. Teach. I knew I had to go teach so that I could be home early to be with the children as much as possible. And I was injured. So anyway, we found the other daughter hiding under bushes behind the house. And the woman, then they had a swimming pool. She insisted that we come with her for the rest of the afternoon. She says that you have to do something. You have to get your children out of here and try to erase this memory. And then the lawyer called and said I had to pack our suitcases and get the children out first thing the next morning, go to where we were going to move next, where we were staying with friends, stay there 3 days and move on to another person, and find friends that had guns for our protection in case he would. And then on the 3rd day, then call and let him know where we were so we could stay legal, because you can't just take off and not let the husband or the dad know. There's laws involved, and those were California laws then. So we did that, and I got a teaching job right off the bat, and it's going to mean a drive, but I was grateful for anything. And I'll move it on to that next year then. I started having more and more. We rented a house there. I've mentioned before how the police felt he had hired undocumented workers to repeatedly burglarize and rob. The police had no one else in that neighborhood have anything happen. People who worked all day also. So they felt I was being targeted by the ex-husband. We had to deal with those kinds of issues. There were horrible things that went on with the oldest daughter involving the dad. And I had them in a private school then, and a school called me at my workplace. I had to leave and come home. They had to report something terrible involving the oldest daughter to the sheriff's department. Had to get psychologists involved. It was a mother's worst nightmare, and things that had gone on. And I had already suspected from picking up my children. I had to drive even though I was injured. He went to court to make sure I had to drive every other time or meet him halfway, and on top of everything else, and he would skip out on payments. It was a nightmare. He wanted a divorce. Yes, he did. Most definitely. He didn't love me. He became horrible to me. And he had vowed he would destroy me. Um, and he would take everything. He would take the children. He would take everything I had. And he says, I will destroy you. And I will never stop until I have destroyed you. And the Holy Spirit then spoke in me. And I said, you may take everything, but you will never get my soul. And amazingly, he just looked at me with that. He didn't try to hit me or threaten or anything. That took him back. But not that he stopped. I think he's continued because he has succeeded in turning our son, who's now 40, against me. So, but he's not gotten my soul. Anyway, I'd better stop now. This has gone on a long time. We haven't even gotten to the death experience. But I think maybe I need to say some of these things as part of a final therapy, because I have PTSD flashbacks. I still do, despite having years of therapy off and on. So I'll just share all these things, I think, or whatever comes to me to share. And maybe this will be a warning to anyone who marries someone who even has little inklings of lies or things. Don't shove them down. The person's got a disorder. God bless His real presence in us, and let us love as God loves. Because, yes, I pray for this former husband still today. Not always, but just the other day I prayed for his soul. So that's, and I can do it with genuine care and concern. So let us love as God loves.